Today, I'm going to break down and show you the antidote to one of the most toxic lines in chess. After all, it has made countless chess enthusiasts doubt their abilities and feel like complete failures. 700,000 people have fallen into the trap of this antidote. This explanation will be the most detailed and clear, but only if you watch it until the end. Let's go! Today, our attention will be focused on the fried liver attack. Just these 3 words are enough to make countless enthusiasts tremble with fear. They've tried everything to stop white from placing the knight on g5 and attacking the f7 pawn. Some play h6, but that's not the solution. And today, we're going to figure out how to deal with it. The simplest way. Of course, that's to play either the French defense or the Sicilian defense, so you don't have to study a huge number of different gambits or sharp, complicated lines from black when white uses them against you. This way, you can focus your preparation and avoid being overwhelmed. But let's say you're a warrior, a samurai who has no goal, only the path. Well then, let me help you figure this out, and I'll clearly explain how to outwit your opponent here, making sure you understand each step. We're going to play d5, that's the main continuation. White captures on d5, and their hope is that you'll take this pawn on d5, and after the move, knight f7, king e7, queen f3, unfortunately you'll have huge problems. Leave a like if you've been beaten like this many times. So, after the move e takes d5, knight a5 is the main theoretical move in this position, after which many theoretical branches arise. But today we're going to look at knight d4. A long time ago I already reviewed this variation from black's perspective, but I felt that the explanation was insufficient, maybe not the clearest or most detailed. So today we're going to analyze this variation again. So, what's our idea? Everyone who looks at the fried liver attack from white's side usually doesn't pay enough attention to this move with the knight to d4. And now let's see how white players usually respond to this variation. There have been people here who still go for knight f7 right away. They aren't bothered at all by the fact that the bishop is still blocked. And after king f7, d6, we simply move to e8, take on c7, queen takes c7. You have an extra piece right from the start of the game. Yes, the king isn't castled, but white doesn't have any pieces in the attack. If you still lose here, well, unfortunately, it will be hard for me to help you in this video. So, knight to f7 doesn't scare us. The move knight f7 doesn't scare us. Let's go through things step by step. 700,000 people as white play d6 here. Of course, this move is a bad one. This is a mistake by white. Their idea is that after pushing the pawn forward, they can open up their light-squared bishop and attack the pawn on f7. In that case, we simply capture it with the queen, thank our opponent, and don't pay any attention to the fact that our pawn on f7 is under attack. So if they capture with the knight, it looks like a fork on the queen and the rook, but we respond with queen to c6, attacking the light-squared bishop and the pawn on g2. White takes the rook on h8. We play queen to g2, attacking the rook and forcing it to move to f1. That's the only square it can go to. We give a check on e4. If the opponent blocks with the queen on e2, we capture the queen. And if the bishop blocks on f3, we checkmate with the knight on f3. A huge number of games have ended exactly this way. Checkmate to the white king in 10 moves. What more could you possibly wish for? But if white captures on f7 with the bishop, then we play king to a7. And now a very unpleasant threat hangs over white. We want to play h6. So if white castles, we play h6, chase away the knight, and win a piece from the opponent. Again, from the very beginning, we have extra material. If white realizes this and retreats the bishop to b3, in that case we can exchange pieces and drive away the knight. Do this one more time, and in that case, the king feels absolutely fine. You have excellent compensation for the sacrificed pawn. If white moves the knight to h4, we simply play g5 and trap it. If white retreats the knight to g1, then we play bishop to g4, and here, well, it's almost a complete rout. If they check, we cover with the bishop and continue developing our pieces. If they cover with a pawn, we capture it and pin the opponent's queen. We win. It turns out that white can't play d6 because they immediately run into huge problems. Well, if after the move d6, white suddenly changes their mind about capturing on e7, maybe they've realized your plan, and they play d3, then we play knight to d5, already blocking the opponent's bishop. The point is, the queen on f3 can no longer come out, and if you get chased away by the pawn on c3, then the knight can simply return to the square. A6. And you have no problems here at all. You just continue developing your pieces. And castle, you get a good position. And if the knight comes out, you reinforce the knight on d5 with your pawn. Castle. Bishop to e7. Again, just normal development. You castle. And start playing chess. What else can white do here? White can castle. In that case, we chase away the knight. The knight retreats. We have won. At this point, we bring the bishop out to g4. The bishop comes out to e2, so as not to allow us to ruin the pawn structure around white's king. They exchange, and we simply transition to the endgame. Queen to d5, knight to d5, rook to e1, bishop to d6. d4 is the most principled move white has here to put pressure on the pin. We play knight to b4, creating a counter threat of a fork on c2. White has to defend. We play knight to a3, and simultaneously castle queenside, moving the king out of the pin and bringing the rook to an active position. And if they take the pawn on a5, then we have bishop to a5. And now the bishop can't be taken because the rook will go to d1 with checkmate. Castling doesn't scare us either. If they play d3, then we play b5, chase away the bishop, exchange, and take with the queen on d5, no problems at all. Then we bring the bishop out to b7. If the opponent manages to defend against all this, we simply finish development. For example, if the queen returns to f3, we bring the bishop out to c5, d6, wherever castle, and we have a great position with two bishops. Again, the middle game begins. But the most important thing is that you've thwarted your opponent and didn't let them carry out the main ideas in the fried liver attack. We've discussed d3, knight to c3, we still play h6 and similar lines. Our task is to chase away the knight, bring out the light squared bishop, and if bishop to e2 is played, again, we just exchange. But in this case, we need to bring the bishop out to b4. Why do we exchange, by the way? Because if we don't, then knight to d4 will follow. There are problems with the bishop there. Because if you take on a2, your opponent will retreat with the knight and you'll be left without a piece. Bishop to b4 is the move we need in order to put pressure on the knight. They take on f3, and we capture on d5. A familiar endgame arises, yes, on our board. The queens are exchanged, and we play f6, f4. Once again, white is trying to put pressure on the pin on the e5 square. We castle long, queen takes, rook to h, e8. We have completely finished our development. Now we'll win back the pawn. Black has not a single problem in this position, and here we've reached the correct response from white, which, by the way, has been seen even at the highest level. Here, white should play c3, but in that case, we still play b5, driving away the light squared bishop. In other words, a counterattack. The only correct move white has is to retreat the bishop to f1, because if the bishop is moved to d3, well, we can play bishop to f5. Once again, we've developed a piece with tempo, and again, we have absolutely no problems. Now we'll win back the pawn on d5, we'll finish our development, and everything is going well for us. If after the move b5, white captures the knight on d4, we take the bishop, and capture the pawn. If there's a check with queen to a4, we simply block it. We'll move to the d7 square, and after the exchange, we have excellent compensation, because the knight is just itching to jump in. To jump forward and once again put white in an uncomfortable position. The compensation here is unquestionable. If instead white takes the pawn on c4, then again, we can simply transition into the endgame thanks to our good compensation. Knight to b4, then bishop to e6, white faces serious problems. If after c takes d, b takes c, white takes on e5, we capture with the queen on d5, attacking g2. So if white castles, then bishop to b7 comes with tempo, threatening mate. The queen returns, and we go back to a7, once again finishing our development. The knight is always ready, if needed, to go to c3, or rather, to d3, and if the white knight goes to the rim, we play queen to d3 ourselves, and again, white has some issues developing their queenside. If after d takes and queen d5, white captures the knight on f6, we take on g5, knight fg, bishop g7, castle, bishop b7, threatening mate. Checks do not scare us, because we are simply ready, if necessary, to move our king to the very center. And here, there is not even any reasonable way for white to save themselves. On f3, we give a check, castle long, and just bring all our pieces in to checkmate the white king, since their queenside is not working. According to the engine, the position is almost -5 here. Friends, all you need to do is bring your pieces in and go checkmate the white king. This is also a quite likely scenario that you might encounter in your own games. The only correct continuation is bishop to f1. But in this case, you need to remember the forced line. We capture on d5 with the knight. White takes our knight on d4. Queen to g5. Bishop to b5, check. We move our king to d8. White castles kingside. We play bishop to b7. Aiming at the g2 square, for example, if white, suspecting nothing, now plays pawn to d3, then after knight to f4, we have 3 attacks on the g2 square. Mate is threatened, and there is no defense, because after g3, mate still follows with knight to h3. Here, the white king feels very uncomfortable. Well, and rook to e3 is the only move. A strong and correct continuation from white. We arrive at the following position. Rook to b8. We need to protect our light-squared bishop so that the knight can jump somewhere. Captured on e5. Knight to e3 with check. If you take the knight, then it's mate on g2. Queen to h3. We capture with the queen on g2. Otherwise, we ourselves would be threatened with mate on d7. And we get this kind of position without pawns. We undermine white's center. 4 knight to h4. Bishop to a2. We transferred the knight to e5, putting pressure on d4. Well, for example, here they might play rook to d1 or knight to c3. In other words, this position has actually occurred at a high level. If you look at the master database, this position has occurred quite, well, not infrequently, let's say. Here, they usually played bishop to a7, but knight to f6 is also a good move. So if the move f4 is played by white, and they decide to defend this pawn, what we do in response is quite straightforward. We simply bring the knight back, and then we transfer the knight from the c3 square, moving it to d4, and then to c5. Yes, at this point, we probably now get the pawn back and the game continues from there. However, the position will be open and we will have the advantage of 2 bishops on the board. Yes, I have to admit here that white's position is a bit more pleasant and it's easier for them to play in this situation, but these are 20 moves that in reality no one who plays the fried liver attack is actually familiar with. You can take my word for it, friends. No one will use this particular line against you unless, of course, they've watched this very video. If they've watched this video, then honestly, I can't help you any further. If, after the move f4, they immediately try to retreat the bishop to the e2 square, then in that case, we bring the knight back again, and then we move our knight to h4 and transfer it to the e5 square. We don't need to get stuck there or worry too much about that position. So, friends, we've now looked at all the main continuations that white has available, and we've examined them quite deeply and in great detail. I sincerely hope it was extremely clear what we want to do here against white, how to put them in a bind, and how to make it so your opponent never wants to play the fried liver attack against you again. Remember, understanding these lines and being prepared for them will give you a significant advantage in your games, and you'll be able to handle any surprises your opponent might try. Thank you for watching, and I hope you feel more confident facing the fried liver attack in your future chess games.